Josh here for quilting straight lines in a 9-patch block. I've already knocked out most of this, and for all the travel stitching it has, and it's a lot, I found this one to actually be perfect for beginning. I wish I'd actually started out on this one. So let's get going.
Has stitching on the lines, on these spoonflower marked lines, been a little bit easier this time around?
It absolutely has. What's nice about this one, everything is a straight line, and it really forces you to get to know your machine. And yeah, you look at it, my first thought was, wow, this is a lot of busy work, but I've actually enjoyed this one more than any of the other ones we've done so far, just because it's technically very easy.
Just all the straight lines. It's not a lot of complication to it.
And so it's pretty logical too once you lay out your battle plan of how you're going to stitch things, because this border in here, as you can see, requires different moving around than these bigger lines.
And I see that one thing you decided to do is just simply avoid some of the lines, just ignore them. You're just not going to stitch on some of the lines?
Yeah, I decided, you know, why not? We don't have to stitch on every single line, so what I've done is I'm only stitching the diagonals.
Within the middle of this part of the block.
45-degree angles. I'm not stitching any of the 90-degree lines.
These would be the ditch lines if you have pieced your block. These would be the ditch lines between two piece shapes. Josh is just basically not stitching those. So that's an option too. If you don't want to ditch, don't.
That could be a bumper sticker motto.
If you don't want to ditch. I'm not sure everyone would get that, but I think it's a good thing to remember. You don't have to stitch on every single line, and you certainly don't have to stitch every single thing that I've designed for these blocks. It's not required.
Okay, now I'm going to travel stitch down through here and knock out this row and this last row.
Yeah, you just got that little kind of toothy border. It's that back and forth straight lines. They remind me of teeth. Ooh, we got a pleat right there. Let's keep stitching down the way you normally would, but we're gonna talk about that real quick because I know a lot of quilters have been talking about that.
And what's interesting, I did not feel the machine gag at all, and usually you feel the slightest thing.
Well, it's not a machine thing. That's a fabric thing.
Oh.
And so what we'll do is just stitch on down and take a look at it. More than likely, it's not even going to be noticeable in the finished block, but I know a lot of quilters were talking about this with the other block that we did, block number 1. We had some straight lines, some grid lines in block number 1, and a lot of people were asking about pleats being stitched. So this is a really good thing that this happened in this block too. So let's take a look real quick. It's really subtle, and you might not even pick it up. But there is just an ever so slight fabric shift right here as Josh was stitching down. It kind of just pushed outward. And basically what happened was the fabric was just kind of a little bit baggy in that area. And it was just kind of pushing out. And because he'd already stitched the outer line, it pushed against that outer line and folded over. Think of it like a belt. A guy with a belt that has a big belly, the belly is going to kind of drape over the tight belt. You know what I mean? So that's kind of what happened, is that outer line of stitching ended up kind of belting the fabric into the block. There's no right or wrong way of stitching your block. You can stitch the outer perimeter line first, that's fine. But you might end up seeing this kind of thing, some shifting of the fabric, and where it kind of pushes up and over your line of stitching, it's going to form a pleat. If it forms it on the outer edge of the block, it's no big deal. We're going to cover this up with binding at the end anyway.
I imagine this happens more with piece blocks opposed to the cheater panels like this.
Yeah, most definitely. If you've pieced your block and you haven't starched your fabric especially, I find that fabric that isn't stabilized with starch has a lot more tendency to shift. And with Josh's cheater cloth blocks, I made sure to starch those too. So it's the starch that kind of makes the fabric a little bit more stiff and stable. When you don't starch, you don't have that stability, and fabric tends to shift a lot more.
And the important thing is, I never would have noticed this if Lee hadn't pointed it out.
Yeah, I was kind of hypervigilant.
I could have looked at it for 10 minutes and I wouldn't have seen it. So if this happens, don't worry about it. Just keep quilting.
And you're just rotating around for what feels the most comfortable for you.
Yeah, when I rotate, it's when I'm starting to feel uncomfortable with the angle I'm going, and as you can see, I go from left to right and downward. Those are the angles that are most comfortable for me. And I also notice when my stitching starts to get a little off, it's time to make a rotation.
Shift
Like
your hands.
after this one right here, I'm going to rotate. Just an intuitive thing that you'll pick up on as you go along.
And you're just shifting it around to make sure you're
Just
right
to
on.
stay, make sure I'm on the line.
Don't hit that one.
Yep.
That's your thread cutter.
I almost hit there's a scissor button here that would have cut the thread. I almost hit that one. Well, we're done. And again, I can say this block was a pleasure to work on. I only found one thing that was slightly challenging were the corner blocks, where you had 22.5-degree angles opposed to your 90-degree and 45-degree angles. Also, they were a lot closer together than everything else.
Just everything got really tight in those corners.
And if Leah wasn't here, I just would have skipped it. I wouldn't have quilted it.
I'm keeping him honest. So I am Leah Day, and this is Josh Day, and we are stitching out blocks for the Building Blocks Quilt Along. You can pick up a panel of cheater cloth, which is what Josh is working on, or you can pick up the Building Blocks quilt pattern and piece your blocks. Either way, join us and follow along as we learn how to piece and free motion quilt. Find your pattern at leahday.com. Until next time, let's go quilt.